Now for the atoms basics section of this test. The smallest unique unit of an element, if it's an element and it's going to have an identity of that element, it has to be an atom. It turns out that neutrons and electrons and protons are all parts of an element, but they are not unique. So a proton from potassium is the same as a proton from phosphorus, which is the same as a proton from sodium. A proton's a proton. They're not unique. They're generic. All right, the particle that gives the nucleus a charge, since in the nucleus you've got two things, you've got a proton, you've got a neutron, which one's going to have a charge? That'd be the proton. Electrons are negatively charged and have the most mass. Well, they are negatively charged, but they do not have the most. They have the least mass. So that question's false, or that statement's false. Charges of neutrons. Neutrons don't have a charge. They are neutral, neutral, neutron, neutral. So C. C, not E. There we go. There is no E. There you go. C. An isotope. Isotopes are the same atom, but what's different in an isotope is the number of neutrons. So that neutrons vary. Actually, so that goes in that blank. And so if neutrons vary, that's the mass that varies. So neutrons and mass is your answer. That's C. The electron cloud of an atom. Electron cloud, of course, has electrons in it. What's the charge on an electron? Well, it's negative. So it's either A or it's D. Now, do electrons have any mass? If you remember this little chart we had about electrons and protons and neutrons, and we had mass and charge. So electrons had 0 mass, protons had a mass of 1, neutrons have a mass of 1, electrons have a -1 charge, protons have a +1 charge, neutrons have a 0 charge. So if the electrons don't have any mass, are they going to have any density? Since density is mass divided by volume, if they don't have any mass, they'll have almost no density, so the answer would be A. The mass of the atom contained in a pinpoint center called the nucleus, yes, because in the nucleus you've got protons and neutrons. You see both of those have mass, don't they? So that's true, A. Number 8, a charged atom. If it's got a charge, then the charged particles have got to be different. Normal atoms have equal protons and electrons, so the charge cancels out and they have 0. But if it's a charged atom, it's got to have different numbers of protons and electrons, so they can't be the same. Otherwise, it'd be 0. 84 in this number is the mass. So 84 is the mass. Now, if it's the mass, then that includes the protons and the neutrons. They're the things that have mass, remember? So that'd be B. Oops, hit the wrong button there. Okay, so that'd be B, protons and neutrons. Atomic number, number 10, electrons. We had this model of atoms, like they go in circles. They don't really do that. What they do is they travel in regions in space. One's a sphere, one's an orbital, a pea dumbbell shape like this. Remember the peas? So the bottom line is that electrons, they move around the nucleus in orbitals, which are regions in space where the electrons exist. All right, different isotopes of the same element, they're going to have different atomic mass. They will, because they have different numbers of neutrons. So that'd be A. Number 12, all atoms of the same element, if they're the same element, the identity, remember we talked so many times about identity. Identity is atomic number, so number of protons. So that's D. Aluminum 26, so you have 26 protons and neutrons. I don't have a periodic table here, but if you look at a periodic table, you'll see aluminum has 13 protons. So you got 26 protons and neutrons. You know that 13 are protons, so the rest of them have to be neutrons. The rest of them is 26 minus 13, which of course is 13. Number 14, neon lights give off light when excited electrons fall back from higher levels to their ground state. That's certainly true because energy is released when the electrons fall back in the form of light. We saw that in the light tube demos that we did in class. All right, now here we're looking at oxygen 15. So I'm going to put an 8 here because that's the number of protons, and 15 is the mass. And we'll use this notation. It's a -2 ion too, so we'll put a -2 there. So this number here tells us the number of protons. This number tells us the protons and the neutrons, and this tells us the charge. All right, so if you got a -2 ion, you got oxygen 15, its mass is 15. Well, we want electrons. So let's see. Protons equal electrons, so there should be 8 unless there's a charge. Oh, is there a charge? Yeah. So what's a negative charge mean? So negative charge, that means you've gained an electron or 2 or 3, however many your charge is. In this case, the charge is -2. So how many electrons have I gained? 2. So instead of having 8 electrons, how many do we have? 10. So the answer is 10. Protons, that's just straight up 8, because protons never change. So the answer is B, 8. Neutrons, we know that protons plus neutrons equals mass. I did change the element here. So this is nitrogen 14. So nitrogen 14 would be N714. So 14 protons and neutrons, 7 protons, which means 14 minus 7 gives you 7 neutrons. So that'd be B. Number 18, anions are negative ions. How do we say you get to be negative? You gain. So the answer is gaining electrons. What part of the atom gets lost, gained, or shared during a chemical reaction? What's on the outside of the atom? It's the electrons, so that'd be B. The things that are on the outside are the things that will be involved in a chemical reaction. All right, number 20, element Z has 2 naturally occurring isotopes. So you got 20, come down here, 20 and 70 at 75. So if you multiply those numbers together, you get 1,500. Then you have 22, and that's only 25%. So if I multiply 22 and times 25, I don't know what that is. So 25 times 10 is 250, times 20 is 500. Then add 2 more 25, so it'll be 550. Okay, so you add those together, you get a 5 and you get a 2050. Now you have to divide by 100 because we used 100 atoms in our sample, 75 and 25. So divided by 100, that's supposed to be right. Whoops. Yeah, right there. Okay, so 2050 divided by 100, that equals 20.5. So the answer is B as in boy. That's the end of that section.